Hello everyone, and welcome to another casual stroll through Lord of the Rings Online. My name is Matt Elliott. I go by Scenario on the message boards, and I'm a senior world designer who works on Lord of the Rings Online, and I've been doing this for a long time now. Here we are for our fourth and final landscape preview of Kingdoms of Harad. We've got one more coming up next week, which is going to be about the interiors and dungeons of the expansion pack. But for now, for this update, or for this stream, we're going through and taking a look at the region of Idagâl, our fourth region for the expansion pack. For those of you that are new to this stream, this is a world design focused stream where I'm going to be talking about what goes into building the landscape and world of Middle-earth and how we adapt Lord of the Rings to a video game. This is not a stream to talk about things like lag, performance, PVMP, class balance, all of those things. Those are outside of my wheelhouse. I'm not the right person to answer those questions, and your best bet is to check in with Court of the Ring on Fridays or to ask your questions on the message boards or Discord. But for now, you got me here to talk about the landscape, what goes into building a region, as well as maybe a little bit of talk about what goes into making housing. That's one of my little areas as well, and I know there were some people that have discovered some things in Bullroar related to housing, not just decorations, but there are certain changes that are more visible now. But anyways, as I said, here we are. Right now we're parked at the edge of Ansharu. Let me bring up the map real quick so you can see where we're at. This is kind of where not exactly where we left off last week. Last week we ended our stream here in the very southern borders of Kudzagin, because that is one of the ways that you can get into Ansharu from other existing landscapes. You can come in through Kudzagin. But for this stream, I wanted to start up here kind of at this crossroads looking out into Idagâl, because this is where the terrain starts dropping down and we go into what was once a beautiful, almost a, I want to say like valley retreat, lake country valley retreat for the people of Shagana and Umbar. And ever since the Ordokai have moved in, it's become a drained and barren land where its once beautiful forests and lakes have basically fallen to ruin. There's one seat of power in this region, which is the city of Emac Duel, which is where the Ordokai seat of power is in this region. And it's honestly the nicest looking part of the region, where everything else has just been, the resources have been drained from the region by the encroachment of the Ordokai. So with that in mind, why don't we begin our run through the region, and I'll be paying attention to the chat and answering what questions I can as I move along. But I also need to run a little bit faster in order to do this. One of the things I commented on last week in my stream was how I needed to, clean up the roads a little bit, because you can't really see the road textures here with all of the rubble and crystals and whatnot in it. So that'll be a polished task that I'll put on my plate over the next few weeks as we gear up for the launch later this year. Malefic Morningstar says, so Umbar made my dwarves, everything falling apart. Well, I wouldn't say everything's falling apart. They're just certain bad actors that have moved into these regions that, it's like any invading force where if they're not approaching the space with care, it is very easy for it to fall to ruin, especially when, in the case of the Ordokai, they are here primarily for the resources that once existed in here. One of the things too, in talking about like upcoming development, you see this tree stump here. This is kind of one of our placeholder pieces. One of the things that we had asked of Art for this region specifically was for a new set of tree stumps that fit within this region. And so I'm not sure when we'll be getting those in, but the hope is that we'll be getting them in soon, and we can quickly and comfortably just slot them in and make things look awesome. So as we make our way down, there are forward camps here. I think this is an NPC camp. Friendlies? Friendlies, yes. I think this is, you know, I'm not sure what this is. This is not a region I've built, so I'm not familiar with everything that's going on in here. So we're going to be stumbling through it together. I did some work in the various quest hubs that we have in the area here just to make sure that they had their game systems in place. But I really do love the vista here. You get this just kind of nice, open, sprawling valley, which compared to being up in Anshuru, where you've got mountains lining you on either side, it kind of feels like you step into this region and everything opens up. One of the things you'll notice here too is, one of our new asset sets here, the aloes. These are available as housing items. I think there's an assortment that's available through Lalia's Market, and there's going to be an assortment that's available through either barter or quest rewards, I believe. So as we'll continue here, when Orion and I did our kind of kickoff for all of this, we have a cave troll talking about just the general overview of what's going into the expansion pack. Our preview view was of this town, Ahaba. This is the major hub for this region. It's where you're gonna find most of your town services and whatnot. I think every hub has a base set of town services that we try to make sure exist. But whenever we have a major hub, there's a little bit more in here. I think we have like banker, auctioneer, like those kinds of town services as well, so that you don't get to the region and find like, oh hey, there's like I got to go back to Breetown to store my stuff and whatnot. So you get a lovely, I can only imagine the sunsets are beautiful here. We're not at that time of the day yet. I had set the time of day to kind of like early morning, just so that we could get some of the sunrise effect. So now we're here in I would say we're probably mid-morning-ish at this point. Grot Maggot says, the skybox in Dayfile looks spectacular. It's like a painting. I think that's one of the challenges with building new regions is oftentimes we'll have this idea of what we want the region to look like, and there will be Dayfiles that exist that are like really close to what we want, but it's always kind of important for us to, as we're building out these regions, to have just a little bit of something new and extra in these Dayfiles. A slight change of color, a change in how the sunset is, just something or even in the night sky, just something to set, a Dayfile apart. Like we probably could have like gone with using like the Kijan Dayfile in here as well, but that wouldn't necessarily fit the character of the region, and it also wouldn't bring us something new or give us another thing that players could get for their houses as well. All of the regions introduced in the expansion pack do have Dayfiles associated with them that you can get for housing. I'm pretty sure the furnishers of each region have those on them. So that's also one of the reasons why I think it's important for us to try to have a little bit of something different and something fresh in every Dayfile, just so that if players want something a little different decoration, they can get those decorations. All right, so we'll make our way out of Ahaba. There are two ways in and out of it. One of them, the travel routes go right across this bridge because there's another hub up to the north that we'll swoop around and see as well. I'm not going through this region kind of in the order of progression, in part because I'm not sure what the order of progression for this region is, but also because I do want to save Emac Duel for the end of this trip. So you look up there in the mountains, you can see, this is the ridge line where it kind of drops off and goes from Anshuru down into Idagâl. This up here is like where the Grodbog camp was that we saw last week. Up there's the Quelling House you can see in the distance, and just the Ridge of Plenty in general. But I want to make my way up into them there hills. Grot Maggot says, I was just about to ask what considerations you do to break apart the landscape with points of interest and stuff. So that's always something, you know, we'll often end up building our landscape. So this is a great view here too. This is pretty. We'll end up building our landscapes, and after our first pass is complete, oh, your tail is all sorts of messed up too, buddy. I'm sorry. We'll get you fixed soon, pal. Oh, and your nose is doing weird things. Oh, that's a little... We're not going to look at that anymore. That's uncomfortable. Whenever we build a region, we will do our first pass on it all. And then just like hop in and run around. And we generally like to try to find a few places here and there where we can get just like good vistas, good viewpoints throughout a region, which is tricky for flatter regions. But in a place like here, Idagâl, where we do have a good amount of up and down, and also we have the lake bed, which is itself just drained. You know, you're naturally going to be higher up when you're on what was once the shore. So you get those vantage points, you get those cool screenshot moments, you get those opportunities to, you know, sit there, watch the sunset. And we try to make sure that every region has those kinds of like cool views in it, those compelling like points of interest. Even if it's something as simple as just a little bluff that we've built that doesn't have anything going on in it content-wise, it is just something that we've specifically built in order to showcase what the region looks like. Malefic Morning Star says, will we be getting sandstorms in any of the new areas? Yes. I'm pretty sure that Kijan, Ansharu, and Idagâl all have some variation on those. Idagâl doesn't, of course. Kijan might not. I'd have to go back and look. It's been a while since that stuff was set up, and a lot of times when we are in development mode, we will do our work, and then once that work is done and checked in and we verified it works and it looks good, we kind of like get it out of mind, right? Because we've got other stuff we need to work on and other things that we need to do. So having those things kind of floating around in our head don't necessarily help. I'm seeing this here, and one of the things I think I need to do is go into all of the poppy and tulip frills that we got for this expansion pack and make sure that they've got that terrain blending tech built into them so that they're not just like bright green on dirt, basically. We have a lot of different aloes in this update. So many different styles of aloes. I don't know that they all got put into the scene files either. Let's see. Some of the new housing deco items are very nice, but not sure if they are part of the update or reward track yet. That's from Malefic. Correct. So usually whenever we or I produce a lot of housing items, I build them all out, and then we kind of over time decide how those housing items are going to be allocated. You know, what reward directions are going to be available from. Do you get them from a vendor? Do you get them through barter? Do we hold on to them? There's some stuff that I built that, you know, when we were looking at it, we're like, oh, that would be a really cool thing for like the anniversary event, or that would be really cool for next harvest math, like those sorts of things. So even though, you know, I think, what did the grand total end up being? Oh, I want to get a view of this real quick. I think the grand total of like new housing items that I made, not counting anything that was specifically made for housing by the art team and requested by content and whatnot, but just stuff that I made based off of the art assets that were created for the expansion pack. You know, over 500 easily. Not all of them are going to be a part of the what is available at the launch. You know, some stuff is allocated for future releases, some stuff, we kind of felt like, oh, well, this looks like really similar to other stuff that we already have. So maybe we don't need to release that right now, or maybe it's kind of more of a rainy day release kind of thing. So, so yeah, that's where it stands with those things. We did, I don't remember if I mentioned it or not, but like when we did get the assets for Jarrett Manesh and the Temamir dwarves, one of the things that I did was I made a whole new set of decorative, stairs and all of that stuff to kind of go along with that style of thing. So, I wanted to make sure that all of our dwarves were represented and that there were things for the dwarves of Jarrett Manesh to have as housing items as well. Oh, we need to do a far view pass. There's some things here that just kind of blipped in. And again, that's another like step of polish for us as we go through. Drewster says, obviously a lot of people had deserts in mind for Harad, and there's some of that, but I'm honestly surprised that there is so little. Not a complaint by any means, but interesting that you led to that decision. If you went over this in the previous stream, please feel free to ignore. So yeah, I think originally when, 3.5 or so years ago when we made the decision to head to Harad, I think a lot of us were, I don't know why my day file is going wonky right now. A lot of us were kind of like thinking, oh yeah, we get to build the Sahara Desert. But as we started working on things and making our plans on things, I think our ideas for what we wanted sort of changed. Let's see if I can get us back, which I don't think I'm going to be able to. I don't know why this is working. This is another fun part of what goes into making an expansion pack. I might need to teleport away and teleport back. So let's, oh, and now I have it back. Awesome. I'm confused. It's part of the fun of building an expansion pack and doing things live, because you never know what's going to happen. So where was I? What was I? Oh yeah, talking about going full desert. I think originally were thinking, oh yeah, let's do the full-on Saharan style desert. But as we started thinking about the story we wanted to tell and doing the research into like what the landscape would actually be like, we felt like there was an opportunity for us to explore different styles of arid lands without getting to the full-on desert. And really hold off on that, true sandy Sahara-y desert space until, we had gotten through and gotten a little bit further away from Umbar itself. Because this area, if you think about the what lore is available for it as well, it's a little tricky because, you also have descriptions of like massive jungles kind of in this region too. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't, overstepping or doing things too quickly. We also wanted to make sure that we could sell pseudo desert and arid convincingly before trying to hit that like big beat of, here is your Sahara in Lotro kind of thing. Grot Maggot asks, and to add to that, have you mapped out general biomes for future regions at this point? Like, this will be swampy area, this will be more arid. I think at a high level, yeah. I think in my cartography of Shigana stream last year, one of the slides I had in there was talking about the different kinds of geography and the different kinds of biomes that you could find in these regions, and the designer who built that, Chris Pearson, he like pretty extensively covered most of Harad and South Gondor as well, in terms of like figuring out like what kinds of biomes would exist in all the different areas. So we have a high level sense of, you know, this should be kind of more arid, this should be deserty, this is where a forest is, this is where jungles are. We've got that pretty well mapped out, at least at a high level. You know, I think as with anything, as we're building this stuff, there is room for flexibility. So as we're building, we can kind of step back and go, okay, well, it would make more sense for this to be like this, and this is not supposed to be like this, nor is this person supposed to be here. So this is interesting. Let's just get this written down so that I have this as a note. All right. Boom. Pay no attention to the floating aloes and the weird avatar standing there. So yeah, like we have a high level plan, and then those plans can be adjusted as we actually turn towards building out those areas. You know, I think if we ever move towards things like Rune and Darwinian, or Darwinian and or Khand and whatnot, like we'll do very similar things with those areas too. Even just like, you know, once we start planning out where we're going next, even if it's only just one region ahead of us that we're thinking about, we do those high level steps of thinking about like what makes sense for this based off of what's around here, like all of those things. So Crazy Blue Squirrel says, are you including some kind of salty swamps that can swallow careless travelers? I think they exist in some real earth salt deserts, but I have no idea how you can include that in Lotro. There are no plans for that right now. We do have some like geothermal pools in Ansharu, and we were originally thinking like, do we want to give them some sort of gameplay mechanic associated with them, but ultimately decided to just like pull off on that and not do that, because we didn't really feel there was a strong need for it or a compelling gameplay purpose for it in what was being done in the region. Here we have another Grodbog hive. These are some of my favorite new assets that we have, just because like they're a revamp of old assets, but they've got a little bit of extra to them, which makes them a lot of fun to work with. This goes back. All right. So Druidfire says, I'm not sure if I love or hate the fact that the aloe plants are solid. I feel like my war steed would want to pitch over their head over time, or every time they rode over them. Yeah, that is purely for convenience in traversal of landscape. Back in the original game, every bush had physics to it. Every single bush. So you'd bump into this, and then you'd bump into that, and then you'd bump into this, and if you were just trying to get from, one side of a region to another, it was painful. And ever since then, we have tried our best to make traversal of landscape less of a headache. So a lot of stuff, even if they are on the larger side of things, but if they are used pretty regularly on landscape, we try to avoid having them have physics. Sometimes some stuff, slips through the cracks, and there are things that, things that we have to go in and adjust later on because we've forgotten them. I keep running into bushes every so often that are like that. But generally, it is just to avoid us all having the headache of bumping into every single thing on our horse while we're running through. So now we're in the lake bed here. It's been dried out pretty thoroughly at this point. we're not going to be in here too long because we're going to go to the right here shortly to get up into those to the other side of the lake bed. But you can see, imagine this is where the water line used to be, and it is now no longer there. I think the dry lake bed too is a kind of biome that we've never really done before, so we had to kind of sit and figure it out, especially when thinking about like what do we do for stuff like flotsam and whatnot at the bottom. I know very often, particularly in heavily used bodies of water, heavily used lakes and whatnot, you will regularly find that there are things like shipwrecks and whatnot at the bottoms of those lakes. One near where I grew up, there were several ferries, like pleasure cruise ferries that you could find at the bottom of that lake because they just at some point capsized and sank to the bottom. So it was different. Like what kind of plants might be down there in a dried out lake bed? What kind of objects might be down there? Are there remnants of animals there? I think we have a great fishbone, like dead fish, terrain texture that was made for this purpose as well, which I'm not sure if it's been painted down yet, but it might be present as we're running around. So this is Dawn's Warden. This is one of the quest hubs as well. It's sort of a rough militant camp, but I really do like just the cragginess, canyoniness of this area. It feels good. There's lots of up and down, but it doesn't feel like it's too extreme. Snafudo says, on the subject of physics, is it possible to make housing items so that when you put them down on grass, the grass doesn't poke through? Unfortunately, it's not. Grass is something that is baked into the terrain itself. So it can't dynamically appear and go away. We have the option we can either decide to have grass or have no grass, but when you look at a place that isn't decorated, and there's no grass, it doesn't look great. So often we usually do a very short grass, just so that there's a little bit of something going on there. You can see remnants of the water in the lake bed there, and what appears to be some rather large bones at the bottom of that lake. I wonder what that could be. Thangdrim says, it really feels like a merge of Kudzagin and Ureshtar. It's interesting that you mentioned that. The designer who built this region was the designer who built the landscape for Kudzagin, and he looked a lot at how I used these canyon rocks in Ureshtar and wanted to try to have some similar feel to portions of the landscape here. That canyoniness, but with a different take, as opposed to the water cutting through and forming the canyons. This is more a fact of, the water is gone. It's lacking water. And because it's lacking water, now you have these canyons that have formed. I love this style of bridge so much. It is so much fun. Gives me Indiana Jones vibes. All right. Well, we'll work our way around into the lake bed once again, so we can get a closer look at this POI here in the middle. Jump and jump. Woo! So here we are down the lake bed. I think one of the things, if anything, is going to change here is we're using the flotsam assets in the scene files, and they don't feel like they're quite working right. Some of it's because the physics on the objects themselves are very rough. So you go to run by something, and then you're not able to jump over even or walk on this sort of stuff. So we're not completely happy with that. Though there are some random dead boats here and there. We're not super happy with the flotsam, and I think we'll want to make some changes to that before the final release, assuming we have the time for it. All right, we're here just running around the lake bed. Let's see if I can. I don't think the dead fish texture has been painted yet, so we'll not dig around for that. It wouldn't be a pseudo lake area without our or watery area without our dread tortoise hanging out. And these are just like really, really militant snapping turtles, and snapping turtles are already pretty militant. Thangdrum says, the big bone section was quite noticeable on the terrain map. Good to have a landmark of that kind, non-functional in purpose. Well, you say non-functional, but we just had a drake up ahead who flew out of my render range. It is functional in that it exists as a drake camp, because why not have drakes hanging out in the rubble of a dead dragon? A couple of dead dragons by the looks of it. We got a dragon there. We got several dead dragons. One of the things too that's coming out of this region is we are getting a ton of just like skeletal assets based off of different animals that we have. So, you're just freaking out a little bit. Calm down, Drake. Calm down. So yeah, we will likely have as decoration throughout this region too some more like just parched bones scattered throughout. We have what was once a beautiful causeway, now in ruin, making a very impressive POI as you look out across the lake. From over here, you can see that bridge over there, or this broken bridgeway. That is where Ahaba is. Up there, those dark ruins, that's where we entered in through Ansharu. Make our way up this way. The long slope up out of the lake. Druidfire says, all teeny compared to the skeletons, not as great as their forefathers, as it were. That is correct. It's hard for a drake to compare to a dragon. So another like interesting just general point of geography since we're here. If you look at the map, where you see this POI here and the Haunt of Kyubala is actually right on the other side of the ridge from Dunshuma. So Dunshuma is here. And then this is the ridge line between Kudzagin and Idagâl. And then you have Idagâl, and you've got here the same ridge line, which is where Dunshuma is right there. So there's just a little bit of interesting landscape contiguity that's going on there. There's not an access point at Dunshuma to get into Idagâl, but they are very, very close to each other. We're continuing around. So this promontory here is yet another basis for a quest hub. It's another spot where survivors and heroes have kind of made a little space for themselves to be safe from the villainy of the region and to spoke out into quests and adventures. From here, you can kind of spotlight a few different other monster camps. Like there's something going on up in there, which we'll check out. Then there's also over here, you've kind of got another quarry of sorts. That's one of the things that the Ordokai are big about through a lot of this is, if it's not deforestation, they're also mining the hills for the resources within it to fuel their armies. So here we are at another quest hub. Most of it is all here. I'm not sure what's going in here as far as content goes, but we've got our little camp set up. It's always I think maybe difficult isn't the right word, but it can be a little challenging sometimes to build substantial hub spaces in areas, in regions that are meant to be kind of under heavy conflict, because you're like, well, how would they realistically manage to set up this fortification without, you know, being kicked out basically by the opposing forces? So it's a little tricky, a little tricky. So we're making our way down here. We're making good time through Idagâl too. I'm surprised. Maybe I should slow down and more casually stroll as opposed to run through, but I never really have a good sense of how long it's going to take to get through a region. Um, it's always hard to calculate, especially if I end up like stopping and paying close attention to things and talking about things a little bit more. Um, oh, Eshmakag. I recently did a lighting and deco pass on that. So it's kind of cool to actually see where the landscape entrance to this stuff is. Um, we work our way up. And now we're in Breland. All right, well, we'll make a note for this for myself as well to set this so that we're not in Breland anymore. Breland, and that's floating aloe. All righty. All right, let's work our way back down now into the dry realm, Idagâl. This is an impressive little valley. Ordekai sorcerers here and there and everywhere. Wonder if there's a way into the Eshmakag from here or what that looks like. All right, it looks like it's just an entrance. So we're not gonna try to go in here right now. I would guess that there's an instance happening in there. The way we kind of split up our region, and I've talked a little bit about this before too, is at its core, you know, we're kind of working in this mode of, you know, each world designer gets a region or two, each content designer gets a region or two, and by and large, at least at the inception of those areas, we're working on them solo. They are kind of our places to, you know, sculpt and run within our own teams. Now we're kind of at the point where, you know, principal landscape development on everything is done. You know, we've built everything that we've needed to build. Let me just rocket jump myself up in here because I want to see what's in here. I want to get in here. If my impassable walls let me. They might not. All right, never mind. I made it too good. I made it too impassable. But now we're at the point where we're all just kind of hitting pickup tasks, right? Like I've been jumping around between helping out with deco and lighting and doing some light world systems work, doing, you know, stuff that's getting ready for next updates and whatnot. So we're now at the point where it's like truly all hands on deck collaboration as far as building everything out goes, which is fun too because it kind of gives us all little opportunities to check out what everyone else is working on, put a little bit of a mark on regions that you weren't otherwise normally tasked with working on. And it's just generally helpful too to get a greater sense of, you know, what everything looks like. All right, well, we will work our way down and around, make our ways up into the hills here, and then get ourselves to Emac Duel. Mario Justin says, do you get to pick and choose which designers get to work on which part to work on, or do you collectively decide who does what based on some strategy? Usually, at least with the world design team, I'm not sure how content handles their assignment outside of, I know that Maid of Lions is always the, you know, main storyline guy, you know, for the update at large. You know, with the world team, we often we kind of collaboratively talk about what work is being done together. Oh, hey, we're building these regions. This is what's going to be in these regions. These are the ideas that we have. Here's what the biomes might be. Like, this looks cool. This sounds good. And then when it comes time to actually doing the work, that's when we all kind of just like talk about like the things that are interesting to us, the stuff that we might like to work on. If there's, a region that is particularly interesting or compelling to someone, they'll make the case for it. And by and large, if someone says like, oh, I'd really like to work on this, or I'd really like to work on that, we don't have an issue with just being like, okay, great, you jump on that. Sometimes someone might want a break from something, right? Like, like, oh, I've been doing, awful, horrible, dark places for a while. I'd like a chance to work on one of the like lighter, brighter areas. And, that's another thing that, we're just like, okay, great. You take a break from those, more dire places and you get to work on this for now. So that's generally how it breaks down for us. Sometimes someone will like right out of the gate be very interested in working on something, and then that's the thing that they've got. So yeah, it's collaborative. Crazy Blue Squirrel says, who of you devs does things like developing cultural backgrounds, like region history, societal structure, or do you do this together? That usually starts out with Chris Pearson doing our region personality work. He'll go through and do a lot of research, looking up, what does exist for lore in the places that we're going, and then he works to fill in the gaps of what is kind of missing. If we know, oh, hey, we know this is what happens at this time and this time, but we don't really have a good accounting of the rest of the history of it. He's the one that'll go through and account for the rest of the history, basically. And that starts as kind of the landing point for what the other content designers will do when they get into working on the regions. They, will have his volume of information to kind of look at and pull story threads out of, and work with those. There's still room for them to bring in their own ideas and whatnot, but generally the like core history of a region, the people, the culture, the events, those are something that Chris will do before we go in and actually start working on our individual ideas about what we want in the space. Drewster says, how big are all 4 regions in these regions total as compared to previous supersized regions like Cardolan and Swanfleet or King's Gondor, Shield Isles, and Umbar? I would say things are fairly comparable. We have been stretching our legs from the world design size on building these kind of bigger regions. And I think the nice thing about building those bigger regions is they give us room to grow those regions and grow the content in those regions and just do more things in them over time if we so wanted to. But yeah, I would say the amount of landscape that we're producing is comparable, and a lot of that is thanks to some of the methods that we've developed to kind of help us accelerate landscape development. It's much easier for us to build out these landscapes at a high level initially compared to what it used to be like and the amount of work that it used to take to do those things. So, I think it can be daunting for a designer, whether it's a world designer or a content designer, to come into these spaces and be like, well, this is a big area. This is going to be a lot to put together. And the trick there, I think, is then approaching those spaces as, okay, this is a big area. Do we need to do every single square inch of this filled with content, or can we focus on a core path through a region and leave room for things outside of that. So Malefic Morningstar says, "Is this a road? Is that a road up there or an aqueduct?" I'm not sure which way we were looking. If we were talking about the bridge that was looking like it was ruined, that was definitely a bridge between the shoreline and the island that would have been in the middle of the lake when the lake was here. But now the lake is no longer here, so it is no longer a space that you can get to through that bridge. You know, the magics and efforts of the Ordokai that wrought the destruction and desolation of this region have impacted many things. Oh, I'm being reminded to drink water, so I'm going to drink some water. Yay, seltzer. I think one of the things, too, that we are exploring a bit from a world design perspective in this region is playing with how we use rocks a little bit more. You know, the region here, like normally we just, like when we place rocks, we place them, we rotate them, and we're done. But for these regions, we're exploring a little bit more with, you know, changing how we rotate things, and I think that's allowing us to do more with fewer rocks because we could rotate things in a way that we wouldn't normally rotate them in order to get a certain look or feel. You know, something that might take like 2 or 3 rocks to make a certain thing look a certain way with just normal heading rotation, we can do with just like 1 if we start rotating it off beyond just the heading. And I think that's working like pretty well for us in terms of making these regions feel a little bit more organic with their rock use as well. Mary Alice says, "I notice there seems to be more an issue with the radar maps in most areas, most noticeably in some blocks. Seems that fellowship markers can wander off the radar canvas, and generally coordinates seem wrong. Since the UI is mostly native code, I guess you need task engineering with looking at that, or maybe something to forward internally." It's usually, if it is anything other than creating the images, it is not something I can do much about. It's certainly something that, why are you solid? You should not be solid. It is something that, you know, we would need engineering to look at to kind of give us a better sense of, you know, why that is happening. I've seen it happen before in a couple of, you know, circumstances as well, though I couldn't tell you exactly how to reproduce it. But it is something that, you know, I've observed and I think that we are aware of. We just don't have the time or priority on resolving that compared to some of our other more hot button issues. Mr. Alex says, "I understand that Harad is usually open and wide area, but can you make some regions with more hills and cliffs like Trollshaws?" I think with the Trollshaws, you know, there's certainly something that I would do differently. I think how we approached Cardalon is a more satisfying way of approaching cliffs and hills and whatnot, where there's a lot of traversability. You know, I think where Trollshaws becomes frustrating is when you are trying to traverse it and you know you have to get to the top of a cliff somewhere, but the landscape forces you to backtrack pretty extensively in order to get to the top of the cliff. And I think that's distinct from something like Urashtar, where you're only ever in the canyons. You're never being asked to get up into higher positions. Whereas with the Trollshaws, there are very often times where it's like you go down one alley and you have to just turn around because you're now blocked. You can't go any further. So I think if we were to do something like the Troll Shaws again, we would want to look at it from the direction of what we did in Cardillon. How can we make sure that there's more traversability, even if it's steep hills that you're climbing up, but it gives the appearance of impassability while still being walkable. I think that's kind of the middle ground as far as like those designing things go. So yeah, real quick, we are here in Emac Duel. This is the kind of, how there's Minas Tirith and Minas Morgul. We have Zajana and we have Emac Duel. Zajana is by and large a friendly city, though there are some unfriendly portions of it. Meanwhile, Emac Duel is, full on, city controlled by Ordak, and part of your story through here is doing what you can to establish footholds within it and work against the enemies within it. I'm not sure how instancing is handled through here. If there is instancing, I'm not sure what the content team is doing in this space, though I know the person who was designing this space is having all sorts of fun building it, decoing it, and whatnot. So they are living their best life between all of this plus the interiors that they are building to go along with this. Mario Justin says, I know people have a lot of ideas for Tales of Yore in older regions, but the fact that all these regions are somewhat post-apocalyptic geographically, it would be really cool to see one day see how they could work or how they could look in their prime. I think that's where the value in Tales of Yore or alternate versions of regions come in, is being able to see a very completely different take on a region that players have already kind of gone through and might have become like fondly attached to. We were having this conversation, I think, last stream about the viability of doing a Tales of Yore or post-war Rohan. And the trickiness of that is, is there enough of a change between the Rohan that you experience, when you first go through it and what Rohan would look like after the war? And the change is not considerable. I think for Tales of Yore or alternate versions of regions, we really want to make sure that you're getting something that is distinct from what your prior experience might have been. I think it's just that's important for however we approach that. We've talked about in the past, Tales of Yore Even Dim and Enumenos, Tales of Yore Fornost, Tales of Yore Angmar even. What did Angmar look like before things really went sideways with the Witch King and whatnot. So, I think there are definitely stories to be told in alternate timelines for a lot of regions. I think it's just important that if we're doing those, that we also make sure that there is a good visual hook to go along with that. We're getting close to sunset. So yeah, long-winded conversation. Orion pops in and says, "Silly Ordekai in their water." They're like the golden retrievers of bad guys. They just love to be in the water. All right, let me see if I think this was a dead end here. I think one of the biggest game changers that we got as far as deco items and structural items for this expansion pack are these domes. These domes are so, we've never had anything like this before, and they are such a different visual from all of the Numenorian structures that we had. that it looks so distinct and different and interesting. And I hope there are there are more opportunities to use these things in the future, because we've done, between the Shagana brutalist structure set and the Zajani building set and Hamadi and Umbaram stuff as well. Like, we have a lot of really awesome new architectural stuff that, is just begging for further use. Don't you want to go in that water, buddy? It looks really nice. The Questing Dad says, this place looks amazing. Can't wait to explore it myself. Yeah, I was noticing as we were entering in here, the gate was locked, so I had to rocket jump over. My understanding is, I believe that, the city itself is locked off until you complete instances. And then you'll be able to go in and continue content within this space, having completed those instances. That's why, like, things look kind of empty right now. I'm sure there's more going on in the actual instance spaces, but I'm here on instance 0, so not much happening at the moment. What we really need is a good city clutter scene file. I built one of those when I was working on Londkirion and in Gundabad as well, and they're such useful scene files to have, where it can just be a scene file of like random deco objects, crates and benches and whatnot, to help fill things out. So here's a nice surprise, a nice reprieve as you come up into these gardens. This is a really beautiful area. I'm super happy about this. I mean, the lighting might be a little saturated, but the look and feel and the pergolas are beautiful. Malefic says, I'm sure making those domes was not an easy task. The artist who worked on them, he will just go into his happy space, and then a week later he will drop like 300 structural assets on us to use, like with every single kind of like shape and permutation you can think of. So he is off in his happy place building things, and then we get to reap the benefits from it. It is always awesome to see the work that he does. And it's awesome to see this space too. It's actually a very nice like reprieve and oasis, compared to the desolation of everywhere else in the region. So what do you all think? Emacs Duel housing next? Let's forget Rivendell. We'll just do Emacs Duel housing. Even stuff like this would make a really cool housing item. I might need to start making some combined asset requests for the coming year. Just get some good structures put together. Malefic Morningstar says, this is how I need my home yard to look, so when you make new homes, give us tons of yard hooks. I will give you as many hooks as I can, but, we've all got limits. All right, well, we are getting close to the end of this stream, and I feel like this is a great place to end it too. The most beautiful place, honestly, like, I feel like this is the most, well, I don't want to say the most beautiful, because I feel like everyone can find beauty in anything, but this is probably the most intentionally beautiful place in the expansion pack. It's like, this makes me happy to just run around in. It's too bad while you're in here you're probably going to be getting attacked a lot, but that is neither here nor there. This just feels really good to run around in. Alright, so we'll find a good view. I'll take a look at chat to wrap things up, and then we'll call this stream for the day. The Questing Dad says, so Umbari housing project after New Rivendell, maybe? I think that's probably the strongest contender for next neighborhood is Umbar housing, in large part because the Umbar structures just lend themselves to it so well. The tricky thing with Rivendell housing is so many elf structures are non-square shapes. They're round, they're polygonal, in their shape. There might be a hexagon thrown in there. So that makes it a little trickier to develop interiors based off of that. But I think Umbar housing is an easy low-hanging fruit when we get to that point. Alrighty, well, we'll leave it off with this view. Thank you everyone for checking out Idagâl with me. Right now, Bolror is running. The current regions that are open on Bolror are Idagâl and Ansharu. So if you do want to jump in and check out those regions for yourself, feel free to. As a reminder though, Kijan and Idagâl are not available on Bolror. So if you want to get access to those, you'll have to wait for future Bolrors. And if you're trying to get from Idagâl to Ansharu, you're going to have to backtrack into Ikerbon Valley a little bit and then come back into it. But yeah, so Bolror is live if you want to check those things out. I did mention there's a little bit of extra housing stuff that has gone in and that you can see on Bolror. Some Eagle Eye people have already sussed out some of it, but I haven't seen any comments on another aspect of it. So maybe that's a good scavenger hunt for you all if you are jumping into Bolror and you want to take a break from these regions. Just look at some housing stuff and see if you notice anything different. Anyways, thank you so much everyone for hanging out, for chatting. Next week we'll be doing our final preview stream, and that's where we're going to be looking at the interiors that come with the Kingdoms of Harad. So thank you everyone. I hope you have a great afternoon. Have a great week. Keep an eye on the message boards, on the forums, on social media for any announcements that we have regarding Lotro. Hope you all have a great afternoon and evening. Have a good one.